So today we're going to talk about assignment 3. I have to say assignment 3 is probably my favorite assignment to mark because it focuses on privacy management, but also a little bit about record storage and equipment. Assignment 3 is due on July the 9th at 11:30 p.m. as usual. It is worth 15% of your final grade. The first question: personal information in Canada is specifically defined by the privacy and access legislation, and that we have standard definitions for this at all levels, provincial and federal, across private and public sector-based legislation. Indicate whether the following pieces of information would be considered personal or not personal in accordance with PIPEDA, MFIPA, FIPA, or PHIPA. You don't need to name the legislation, just let me know whether you consider it to be personal or not personal. There are 7. The question is worth 7 points. A person's religious views. B, a person's home phone number and address. C, a person's resume or job application. D, a person's credit report. E, a person's social insurance number. F, a person's phone number and address as appearing on a business card. And G, a person's marital status if this person died in 1955. Now, like in a previous assignment, I think in the first assignment where you were supposed to identify whether an item was a record, an official record, or a transitory record, or a non-record, in this case, you may need to also include a bit of a discussion to provide some logical support or evidence that you've done a bit of an analysis to determine whether or not any of these pieces of information are personal or not personal. In some cases, it's again, not cut and dry. It's not black and white. So you will need to have a bit of a discussion. Question 2. Indicate whether the following organizations are covered under FIPA, MFIPA, PIPEDA, PHIPA, or the Federal Privacy Act. Indicate the specific piece of legislation. And if you're unsure, provide documentation, so links to websites, etc., in your answer to justify your response. Several of these organizations must comply with more than one piece of privacy legislation. Now, in this case, I'm specifically looking at protection of privacy, not necessarily access to information. So for the federal level organizations, you don't need to address ATIA, the Access to Information Act. Now, some of these, and I've given you a hint, C, with more than one, but there may be others. A, Canada Post. B, Greyhound Canada. C, your dentist. D, RCMP. E, University of Western Ontario, i.e. University Records. F, Ottawa Public Library. Or G, Go Transit. There are 7 organizations listed. It's out of 7. In the case where, for C, for example, the mark is broken up. So it's possible to get 6.5 out of 7 if you're unable to identify them all legislation pieces that are relevant. Okay, so question 3, which is worth 10 points. Explain how the records management model, so this is going back to lecture 2, affects the storage and equipment necessary to manage active records. So you're going to look at lecture 5, and you're going to bring back knowledge you learned in lecture 2 to provide an analysis of what is required in lecture 5. Response should include an explanation of the records management model and provide a detailed discussion. It's worth 10 points. So I am actually looking for a good amount of depth in your discussion. Okay? So you might want to talk about the different records management models and what kind of effect or influence they'd have on an organization in their need for storage and equipment. Okay? Question 4, worth 9 points. Basing your response on FIPA, the federal privacy legislation in Ontario, briefly explain exemptions to providing access. Some exemptions are mandatory, others are discretionary. List 2 of each. To answer this question, you may need to review the Act and or the website of the Office of the Information and Privacy Commissioner, the IPC. All right, so I'm asking you for 2 things. You must describe what is a mandatory exemption, what is a discretionary exemption, and provide 2 of each. Now, when you're listing 2 of each, I want you to discuss why are these 2 mandatory? Why are these two discretionary? Why are they not, why are they those specific types of exemptions? You will need to make reference to the legislation. In the Ontario legislation online, the Acts online, the index is hyperlinked, so you'll be able to go right to the exemptions. You don't need to read through every single line of the Act. It can be fairly mundane, fairly tedious to do that. Now, students in the past have stated that this assignment is the hardest one because they're reading legislation. And I sympathize, but as records professionals, this is part of our job. We will need to be able to do this. You will need to be able to do this. And the earlier that you're exposed to reading this kind of writing, this legal writing, the better you'll be when you get on the job. Six, which is worth 5 points. In your own words, briefly describe what a legal hold means in records management terms. How can a records manager implement a hold within their organization? 2 parts to this question. 1, what is a legal hold and how does it affect us in records management? And 2, how can we implement a hold? Now, this doesn't necessarily mean that it's one person doing it. Like, what is involved in implementing that hold to ensure that it sticks? Question 5, a scenario. You want to file an access to information request at your choice of department at the federal, provincial, or municipal level. You choose where you're going to apply for an access to information request. A, describe the steps you would need to take, specifying which level of government you're basing your answer on. So choose one and answer it in that context. B, include the length of time the government has to respond to your request, the fees you would need to pay, and any other factors you think are relevant. C, what are your options if you do not get a satisfactory response to your request? And D, include the links to any websites you consult. In this context, in this question, you're the client, you're the end user, and we all are, seriously. And many organizations collect information about us on a regular basis. So how would you go about getting access to that information? What's involved? What are your responsibilities as the requester, and what are the responsibilities of the organization that holds your information? This question is worth 12 points. As per usual, we are looking for 12-point font size. We're looking Times New Roman, no cover pages required. Have your name in the header or footer of each page. Single spacing, unless you're using a table, which in this case you might want to use a table in a couple of the responses. It's really up to you. If you have any questions, we will be having a chat before this assignment is due. You can post an email to me, you can post on the discussion board, or you can wait to the chat and then we'll chat about the assignment then. If you have any concerns for clarification, same modes of communication. But ways of reaching me, and good luck on this assignment. Bye.